We are going to try today to have a conversation about a topic that we don't necessarily see eye to eye on, which is hard for us
Hard for us.
because we agree on so many things. But today we are going to talk about spirituality. And I wanted to start the conversation with some memories of some alternative spiritualities that we were exposed to when we were children, because I think that we grew up with a pretty uncommon experience when it comes to spirituality.
Our parents liked to explore, but I don't think any of them were way off the charts. I think they were just trying to expose us to different ways of thinking. So yes, they were not the typical Protestant go to church on Sunday, take communion, you know, wear your dress to church. There were other stuff that we explored.
Yes, and we did have that though. I mean, right off the
Yes.
bat, we grew up in a church. And when I say grew up in a church, I literally mean we were growing up in the church. Like we spent probably as much time in the church as we did at home or at school. And multiple sets of parents, multiple parents. It was a raise the village kind of a situation for us with the church that we grew up in. And it was a fairly mainstream Protestant denomination.
So we
So
were there
that
for church on Sunday morning, and then we had Sunday school on Sunday morning, and then I think we had some children's choir on Sunday morning as well. So Sunday was a big chunk of the day at church. And then during Lent, we had Wednesday suppers with a worship after that. And then as we got older, we had youth group at the church. And then our church would host these getaways. So we'd go away for the weekend and we'd go camping in cabins. And then at Christmas time, we would do caroling as a church. And then we often had dinner parties and would go over to people's houses who were from the church. So you're right, it was a really big, at least from a time perspective, a really big piece of our life. And our high school was right across the street from the church.
Yes, and if we wanted to walk home the 3 miles, we could do that, or we could walk across the street to the church and hang out there for a few hours while we waited for mom and dad to get off the bus from work and drive us home. So, I spent
We
a lot more
once,
time hanging out at the church just because it was better than walking the 3 miles.
but it really did feel like another home for us. I remember once we took a bike ride and our dog escaped and followed us into town. We didn't realize until we were halfway into town, which is about 3 miles. And we passed the church and decided we would just leave the dog in the youth room at the church for the afternoon while we went bike riding. And we were totally comfortable to do that because it felt like our place to be.
We must have had keys.
Yes, people were always there.
In middle school, I had confirmation. It was a self-paced confirmation program with some little bit of guidance here and there. And I got through the 3-year program in 2 years, mostly because I was just always at the church. So I might as well be doing something churchy while I'm there. That was not all of the spirituality, though, that we were exposed to. We grew up in a suburb of San Francisco in the 1970s and early 80s, which was an extraordinarily interesting time. I mean, really, literally, that was just on the heels of the Haight-Ashbury, the Flower Children, the hippies. I mean, that's what that whole era was. And so the whole entire area was just inundated with all this alternative spirituality. And so I remember mom and dad had a lot of books on spirituality. They had one on Scientology, which I didn't know what that was until I was an adult. And then I figured out what that was. And I was like, oh, damn, I'm so glad they didn't really get into that because that would have been a hot mess for us.
I do have to interject, though, that our mother liked to read about all the different things, but not because she was getting into it, but because she was an intellect and she liked to understand all of the different options. So I don't think she was ever leaning towards Scientology. I think she was reading it as a defense against it and to understand it as opposed to buying into it.
At the time, I didn't think much of it. I didn't understand any of that. It wasn't until I was adult and realized what that book was that it just like sent a little shiver down my spine.
It was called Dianetics, right?
Dianetics, yes.
I was much younger than you, and I thought Dianetics was a way to eat better.
I saw on their bookshelf one time a book called The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, which is a classic Christian book about the split between heaven and hell. But I thought they were getting a divorce.
Oh no. This was our mother's approach to just about everything is let's get a book. And I've spent most of my life in the same, let's get a book. We're going to travel somewhere, let's get a book. We're going to learn something new, let's get a book.
We were so involved in the church that I think that when we did get exposed to alternative spiritualities, it more enhanced what we were doing rather than tried to draw us away. And I think that there was a little bit of fear, at least on our mom's part, that we might be drawn a little bit too far away from the church. But ultimately, everything that we were exposed to as a kid just was just, let's just see what this is. One of the things that I remember very distinctly is learning transcendental meditation. And honestly, even to this day, I don't know what's the difference between TM and just meditation.
I think we were both under 10 years old. So I have snippets of memories about it, but I don't remember very well.
I remember a room with tires, and maybe it's completely not an actual memory. It felt to me like the tires were there for little kids to sit on while they were meditating or to stand and walk around. That was one of our very first exposures to meditation. And the way that they would teach little children how to meditate was not to sit still with their eyes closed because a lot of kids would just fall right asleep. So instead, we would walk in circles, like real slow, long circles. And they gave us a meditation word.
What was that meditation word called? A mantra. It was our mantra.
We were given a mantra.
But we were given that mantra specifically for us individually based on our aura and everything else. And we were not allowed to share that out loud with anybody else. And I remember a table and we would walk in circles individually. We'd walk in circles around the table and we would say the mantra out loud. So how do we say the mantra out loud and simultaneously not tell anybody else what that mantra is?
I also very distinctly remember hearing you say that word in the bathroom one time, and I was so pissed at you because I couldn't figure out how you learned my mantra word and had the audacity to speak it out loud because the word was ing and it was everybody's mantra word.
It was deep conditioning because right now I'm still hesitant to say ing out loud to reveal that word. It was so ingrained in us to not share with anybody.
It's ing.
It is. It was
Ing.
ing.
Ing was the mantra word. So I also learned how to tell time because of transcendental meditation. Early on, when we were first learning how to do it, Mom told us once to please spend 10 minutes meditating. And she was going to go down and take a nap. And then after our meditation was over, we could play. And we had analog clocks back then. And I thought that from the 12 to the 1 was 1 minute.
Oh, no.
And so I meditated walking around in a circle for 25 minutes. And I thought it was 5. I thought I was only halfway there. And I went into her in tears and I was like, I can't do another 5 minutes of meditation. It's driving me crazy. And she's like, no, you finished a long time ago.
Oh, no. Oh, so you learned how to tell time. That's brilliant.
So I learned how to tell time real fast. That's how I learned an analog clock. That 12 to the 1, it's not 1 minute, it's 5.
Do you remember what the goal of transcendental meditation was?
Based solely on the name, I think it had something to do with transcending our physical selves. Meditating with TM was to get us elevated beyond our physical self.
Right now, Google is telling us that it's a non-religious, which makes it safe for us to have practiced it with our family. And it is intended for restful alertness. So studies say it might reduce blood pressure, lower anxiety, and improve heart health.
I mean, all meditation can do that, I think. Any form of meditation can have those benefits.
So it's led by a yogi called Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Okay.
How's that not religious? Isn't yogi a religious title?
No, I think yogi is a yoga.
But is it that a religious title? I mean, yoga is
Yoga's not religious.
It's religious adjacent.
I never looked at it that way. I think yoga is an exercise, and a yogi is someone who is proficient in yoga.
Is yoga a religious practice? Okay, it is not considered an organized religion, but rather a philosophical or spiritual practice. So what did you learn about yogi?
It just means someone who's proficient in yoga.
Okay,
Oh,
it's a
goodness.
spiritual title, not a religious title.
Okay, well, that's perfect for this conversation. There was a cult that developed out of yoga 10, 20 years ago. That could be where the cult and yoga are intersecting in our minds.
About 30 years ago, when I was a really young pastor in a congregation, we introduced yoga as a class. Sis, we got blowback for that.
Really?
The conservatives in the congregation were not happy that we were offering an alternative religion in the walls of the church.
But it's not a religion, it's exercise.
I know.
Let me look
Well,
up this yoga cult.
it's exercise, but it also can tap into spirituality. And at least in the setting I was in, conservative Christians were really scared of alternative
Okay.
Christianity. So that was my young adulthood. As a child in San Francisco area, alternative spirituality was like, yay, I'll go.
But the people in your congregation in Minnesota in the 1990s probably had grown up in the conservative Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod and probably thought that ELCA was itself too modern, allowing women to serve as pastors was so
I
scary.
think it was like the early 70s, the first time that women were allowed to be ordained into the denomination that I was ordained into.
Okay, so yoga, transcendental meditation, both non-religious.
So, yoga, yes, it is spiritual but not religious, just like 90% of the people who find themselves spiritual but not religious in 2026. Like spiritual but not religious.
I'm not
So,
even that spiritual. I'm not religious, and I'm not that spiritual.
okay.
That's where I
I
am.
will we will get to there. We will get to that. Because we were exposed to transcendental meditation, we also then kind of expanded that just to other forms of meditation. But I do recall a very specific guided meditation practice that our dad did. So, dad was especially into the alternative spiritualities. I think really he was the driver of the actually practicing some of these things. When we were very, very little, we did repetitively where we were guided to sink through a rainbow, which I still find incredibly frustrating. I can't do it because each color takes too long. So even when I'm meditating today, I sink through the rainbow in like one breath rather than seven breaths. Can't do it. I can't do seven breaths. Kills me. In this guided meditation, we created a world where we could go anytime we wanted and it would be a safe place. And I still go there. Even in my 50s, I have created this world and it has evolved and it has changed over the time. But there is a little creek and there's a little tiny island in the creek with a single tree, a giant single oak tree that I can sit under. And right underneath that tree is all mossy. And there are animals and there are bugs, but they don't bug me. They're not buggy bugs. And when I'm having a super stressful day, I can meditate and I can go to that place. And one of my favorite things to do in my meditation, in the guided meditation, is to sit with my hair in the water where the river then flows and pulls my hair because that's one of the best feelings in the world. So even now, that guided meditation has completely and utterly shaped my life in a really good way.
I don't remember specifically that guided meditation, but I have a very strong memory even today of my safe space. There was a suburban housing development close to our house when we were growing up that didn't ever get developed. It was just an empty field. I'm sure it's full of houses today, but there was an empty field. My safe place was to go to that field and we would just run while I was there alone. I would run as fast as I could, as far as I could, just this freedom of running and not getting tired. That was my safe space.
You brought that field into your meditation space?
That was my safe space. I don't remember that guided meditation, but I always have held on to that as a safe space. So I'm thinking that where I learned that, I was probably too young to remember. I might have been 4 or 5 years old, was through that guided meditation that you remember because you were
Mm-hmm.
2 years older than me. If I'm thinking about that space today, I'm thinking in my mind, okay, I got to bring a book or a piece of paper so I can write or do something. I can't just be in that space.
So over the years, my space has evolved, and there is a woman in my space now, but she only comes when I need to ask some really deep questions of myself. So I don't need to write it down, but I can have conversations. She's me, but she doesn't get into my space when
Mhm.
I'm just there for solitude.
Sure.
But when I really have to dig deep and like ask myself some really hard questions, like, is it time to get out of a toxic marriage? That's a good, safe person for me to go and talk to. I don't go into that world unless I am in a meditative state and I'm calm, quiet, and my breathing is slowed and my heart rate is slowed. So I'm much more receptive to receiving what it is that my inner self wants to tell me.
But I want to get back to that guided meditation through the rainbow. That sounds a little familiar to me, but I think I was too young to remember. But today, do you take time and meditate where you're not doing anything but that meditation?
I do when I'm really, really stressed. And I haven't felt that kind of stress in quite a long time. It's probably been at least a year. Stress and my depression kind of go hand in hand. I have gone over a year without a major depressive episode, which I think is the first entire year I've been without a major depressive episode since I was probably like 8. So it's incredible. But yes, that is definitely one of the things that I will do intentionally when I need that time and space away. Or if my mind is racing at 4 o'clock in the morning, that's a good time to do it. I used to get deathly ill with poison oak. If I was just like even like looking at it across the field, I would get it on me. And I would get the oils on my hands and I would rub my face. And several times in my childhood, my face swelled up so bad that I couldn't open my eyes. And it itched. It was so miserable. And so I do very distinctly remember dad doing a guided meditation with me where I was standing under a waterfall and letting the waterfall wash over my face to kind of take that pain and that itch away. And during that meditation, it really was a lot better. Outside of the meditation, it was a miserable experience, and I had to have like wet washcloths on my face because it was just so horrible. But the meditation did actually help. All of those things together created a future for me where meditation is a part of my life.
One you're talking about right now is dad bringing you through a guided meditation to experience the water on your face. To me, that butts up against, if not crosses the line, toward hypnosis, which our father was very into. When we were growing up, our father went to a week-long course on becoming a hypnotherapist. And so he was very into this and he would treat his friends and he would treat us. He was really big into hypnotizing people so that they can get over hay fever, which is very common in Northern California. So he was a very big practitioner of hypnosis.
The hay fever was for mom because she had really severe allergies. But I remember him working with other people in our church on a variety of topics. I even remember him saying one time that he felt a little bit guilty because in the hypnotic state, it's like guided meditation, but maybe just another layer, like a level deeper into your subconscious. But people would say things about what was going on in their lives that maybe they wouldn't have told him if they were just having a chit chat. And so he had to be very, very diligent about keeping all that stuff to himself because he learned a lot about a lot of people.
He was good at not gossiping about people for sure.
Yeah.
And I know that
Yeah.
he helped a great number of people. In my opinion, there's nothing that separates hypnosis from meditation, guided meditation, or even from talk therapy. To me, it's all one spectrum.
Talk to me about ESP because this really was your wheelhouse when we were
Oh my
kids.
goodness, I haven't thought about that in decades. Yes. ESP,
What is
extrasensory
it?
perception. So I never have researched it. I've never read about it, but it was something that our parents were testing, I guess. They were testing it. And I remember oftentimes my father would think of a letter or a shape or colors, and he would say, okay, to me, let's look at each other's eyes and you can tell me what you think that shape, that color, that number is. And then apparently I got it right a lot, and I'm sure I got
You
it wrong a
did.
lot too. But I think that could be just that I was very, very perceptive. I saw everything. And I see it in my son right now. He sees everything. He picks up on all of the slightest details of the world around him. And I think that's what I did as well. And so I could pretty well guess what someone was going to think in their mind.
I don't necessarily think that that's not extrasensory perception. It's not magic, but
Right.
there definitely are people like you and your son who perceive and receive messages, things from the world, visual, auditory, that other people are just unaware of.
Yeah, and I think that the brain, I mean, I'm a neuroscientist. I have a PhD in neuroscience, so I understand a little bit about how the brain works as much as humans do. And we filter out most of what we get from our senses. Otherwise, we would be overwhelmed every second of every day.
Mhm.
And so I think people have learned different levels of filtering. And I think for whatever reason, people like my son and we don't filter quite as much. So I see things that I remember things I put in my consciousness, things that other people might not put in their consciousness. And I can read people pretty well, and I feel like I can at least make a good educated guess on what they're going to say next. But you're right. I would argue the extrasensory perception, I don't want to get down to the grammar of it or what the words mean, but I feel like this sensory perception is what's feeding that anticipation of what was coming next. It comes from the history of what I've heard from that person, the history of what I see, what emotions they're making, what their eyes are doing. All of that is my sensory perception. So I think it's
Yeah.
less filtering, but I don't think it's extrasensory.
You're right. It's a matter of grammar because I would say it's extra because you have more of it than other people do. But I do think that there was an implication in the practice of ESP that we were experimenting with when we were kids because of dad wanting to experiment with this. The implication that it was something a little more supernatural, that people actually did have the ability to leave their bodies.
I do believe that they were under the impression that it was something superhuman or supernatural, as you say.
Like all things that we discuss, it's on a spectrum. And like, at what point does something that you can explain scientifically cross over into something that feels a little bit more like supernatural?
I've got a funny story that's related to my perception of ESP, and that is my son loves a big, big bowl of pasta with some cheeses and some meatballs and some sauce, but he likes it stirred up. He doesn't like stirring it up because it makes a mess and it gets outside the bowl. And so he always asks me to stir it up, and he's 12, and so I don't need to do that anymore. So I brought him a bowl of pasta the other day, and as I'm walking into the room where he was, I said, "No." And then I put it in his arms, and he said, "Would you?" Fine. Like, but that's so easy. I know he was going to ask me to stir it. It's happened 1,000 times before, but that's not ESP. That's understanding who that person is and knowing he's about to ask me something that I'm going to say no to. And he heard me after he asked the question.
That's pretty awesome, though. Not everybody has that gift.
Let's talk about leaving one's body. We had a recent conversation with our mother, and she was talking about leaving her body once to come up and check on how we were upstairs. And I remember the story from when I was a child, and she told us that story, and I was very confused as to whether her consciousness were in her body or in our room with us. It just never made sense to me. So I was taking her pretty literally. I was under 10 when she told us this experience she had of leaving her bedroom to come up and check on us upstairs. And my vision was that there was a little ghost or figure of her that rose out from her and stood up because she was sleeping, stood up and sort of floated with the shape of her and the clothes that she normally wore, floated up the stairs into our bedroom. And my confusion was, where are her eyes? Like, if she was still in her body, was still in her bed, and she opened her eyes, would she see her bed or would she see us? So where was her perception coming from? And I couldn't understand how she could split that and be simultaneously in her bed, looking at her bed, and in our room looking at us. I was very confused.
I do think that she left her body. I do think, and I've pictured it the same way that you just did, which was she floated outside of her body and floated up the stairs. That's, to this day, that's what I think happened.
Well, that's what we saw in Bugs Bunny cartoons when someone died.
Yeah, so that's how
Floated
our
up
brain made sense of it, but I do
right.
believe that her spirit and her perception was in the room with us. I
Mhm.
don't know how, but to this day, I believe that that's what happened.
Okay.
We also looked at um, crystals. We had crystals.
We hung the crystals from a thing, and we would put out a piece of paper with different options, and then we would hold the crystal, because otherwise it wouldn't move. We'd hold the crystal and do a yes or no, yes or no, depending on whether it went north, south, or east, west. Is that a crystal?
That's my crystal that I have to do the same thing as scrying. It's called scrying.
So I'm not bothered by this, right? I think if we attribute that to something else, like we attribute a Ouija board to a dead person, I think that's
Yeah.
a problem. I think
Yeah.
if we're holding that string and we're trying to make a decision that's difficult for us to make with our intentional being, and we want to put it into a little string in our hands instead of taking accountability for that decision, I'm perfectly fine with that. But if we
Yeah.
tried to hang it from something and then saw if it went left or right, I don't think that would give us the answer that we wanted to have.
No, no, because you're right. And this is where we do align. It does have everything to do with tapping into that inner self.
Yes.
I don't think it's a lack of accountability to use a tool like this rather than to just look inward. The stuff that you're struggling to get out, anything you can do to help bring that out is a useful tool, I think.
It was being a little bit reductive. If I'm thinking about buying a car and I give it a yes no by holding the crystal over a yes no piece of paper, I think that's getting rid of your own accountability. Like
Okay.
if you end up not being able to pay for the car and you end up not being able to feed your kids because of that, you say, well, the crystal told me that I needed to buy the car. That's lacking accountability. But right, if you're
Okay.
talking about how do I really feel about this? How do I get rid of the layers of complication and nuance and years of conditioning to really come to a decision that I need to make? Then yes, that's absolutely the right thing to do, and it doesn't abdicate any accountability.
I also do remember hanging prisms from our windows so that we could see the rainbows.
That's just light refraction. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I know. It is. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And I love it. But it made our whole kitchen like all rainbowy.
Nothing wrong with that.
One of the last ones that I recall as a child is pyramid power.
Pyramids. When you talk about our kitchen, I always remember that pyramid that our father built. I think it was a four first, so four sides. What we were trying to validate was whether it kept things inside the pyramid more fresh than things outside the pyramid. Like there was an energy inside the pyramid that would actually keep it in a better state. The one that I distinctly remember is bananas. We put a banana under the
Yeah.
pyramid and a banana next to the pyramid. And I have zero recollection of what the outcome was, but I could, as a scientist, probably predict what it was.
Which was,
The bananas are going to age the same.
yeah, but they didn't when we tested it at home with an open mind of spirituality. The story goes that the bananas inside the pyramids lasted longer.
We're at another point of divergence, I believe, and
Yes,
that
I think
is
we
about
are.
the bananas. There are differences on how quickly a banana goes bad, whether it's with its other bananas, whether it's still in the bunch, how the stem has been broken. So if this was a one-time experiment, let's say he had all the banana bunch under the pyramid and took one off, then that one off isn't with its bunch still, so it's going to go bad faster. Or if he tore two bananas off and one of them had more of the stem attached to it and one of them had less of the stem attached to it, the one with the less stem is going to go bad faster. So even if I did the experiment today, it would have to be replicated several times because there's so much variation already in how fast bananas go bad. So I don't see that at all as a conclusion that the energy within that pyramid was better.
Yes, I actually probably agree with you only because I don't see a great amount of power in a few dowels stuck together.
I don't think
Um,
it was the dowels for him. I think it was the power that his belief imbued into it. Imbued, is that a word? Imbued?
yes, but also you had to point it north. The dowels had to be pointing north. So there was definitely an implication of some energy that would be created because the dowels were pointing in a northerly direction.
Yeah, well that actually has some scientific grounding because the magnetic north is north. And magnets
So maybe
associate with
maybe it
that.
is. I mean, and realistically, somebody who built pyramids a really long time ago thought that there was something about the pyramids that we're just still, I mean, I okay. I'm not going to go down the super conspiracy theories, but I actually have an adult child who is very fascinated with the things that we're now learning about the pyramids that we really didn't know until very recently. And he's convinced that it's something far more intentional, whether it's scientific or spiritual. There's something definitely about the pyramids that is catching his attention, which for me like feels like a whole full circle moment, that my own kids, despite the fact that I did not have dowel pyramids in my house when they were growing up, and I maybe had a crystal or two, but it wasn't a huge part of our lives, but that they still have kind of come around to wanting to explore what other spiritualities might be. Anyway, full
I
circle
love this
moment
for
for
your
me.
son. I love that he's passionate about something, that he wants to go and explore something new that he wasn't exposed to before. I love this so much.
Mm.
This is what growing up and this is what all of life is for, is to go and figure out something that might be new to you. I don't mind at all that it sounds like a conspiracy theory. He's learning something and is
Yeah.
interested in something.
So all of that together. Oh, sis, we were tree huggers.
Trees. Oh, we
Tree
definitely
huggers.
literally.
I will say to
Literally.
people when people want to know like what's my vibe, I will say I was a peace loving tree hugging hippie chick.
Yes.
Still am, still am.
We
So
lived
when
near the
you
California redwoods, and we would basically, it was, if they were walls, we just basically put our arms around the wall.
yeah, we would, and even if they were smaller trees, you just would wrap your arms right around them, and the energy from the earth would feed your body. And I don't think that that's that far off from reality, because even now the phrase that people use these days is touch grass. People will say you need to actually get out of your house and put your toes in the grass and in the dirt. You have to do that to remain connected with the earth in a way that we have sort of lost.
It's interesting to me how the sort of insult of a tree hugger, it's meant to be someone who protects trees. When we grew up, tree hugging was something that we did for our own spirituality and connection to the earth. So it even got misused. It's being misused.
That's interesting. I guess I didn't really realize that that's what other people saw. To me, it's always just been you hug a tree when you need energy. When you need a little love, a tree can give you. So we were peace, love, and tree hugging hippie chicks who went on protests when we were like 10 and 12. We were just fully immersed in a world of spirituality and humanity and wanting creation to, because creation is of course a religious expression of the world. I didn't even realize that. I think of the world as creation, even though I no longer view the creation story as a historical story.
I never put that together, creation and creation. But you're right. You're right. So to me, creation, speaking about the world, is very religious, very Genesis.
Yeah. But anyway, we were exposed to all of those things. And I happen to like, even if some of the things, oh, I forgot one, auras.
Oh my
We
goodness.
could
Oh,
read
here, pull on
auras.
my memories. Yes. Yes, the classic story of a person saw a bunch of people in the elevator and they had no auras, and so he didn't get on the elevator, and then the elevator crashed and they all died. Classic story.
Yes. Yeah. That's, and by classic, I think that was just like we grew up with that as gospel truth, like
Right.
that happened.
But everyone's aura had a color or an
Had a
energy of some
color.
sort. And I,
Mhm.
again, was pinpointed as the one who could identify people's auras quite well.
Yeah, you were really good at reading auras. Dad would also tell stories. Dad Dad would tell a story about that they actually were able to capture on some kind of a magnetic or some sort of a capture device, not a camera, but some sort of a camera. They were able to capture the intertwining of two people's auras when they were having sex.
I don't remember him ever discussing that with me. I would have remembered that conversation.
I remember it. I
Yeah.
don't think he discussed it with me. I think he discussed it with other adults, and you and I always had ears. We
Yeah,
were
we
always listening to everything the grown-ups were always talking about.
we knew enough to not be seen, but we could hear exactly what was going on.
So we had one of these unusual California designed houses where there was like an upper hallway that overlooked the dining area, and the upper hallway led to both of our bedrooms. So we would like army crawl our way into the upper hallway and just sit there, because but our mom and dad had dinner parties all the time,
Right.
all the time, probably more than most people. I thought it was normal. I would love to have that many dinner parties. But they had dinner parties, and the grown-ups would sit around and they would talk about all this stuff, all these alternative spiritualities. They would talk about, so many interesting things, and we would just army crawl and listen. So I'm pretty sure that I heard that story as Dad was explaining to other people the power of being able to read someone's aura.
Intertwining auras. Okay. Okay.
And to this day, intertwining auras kind of gives me the creeps.
It does a little bit to me too, now that you've talked about it that way.
I didn't need to know that. Okay, so let's talk about God not existing. Please like and subscribe and comment. We would love to hear what you think that we should be talking about. Okay, so let's talk about God not existing.
Yeah.
I do think that this is one place that we overlap a little bit.
I thought that would be a completely different viewpoint, because you have a doctorate in biblical preaching. You learned Latin, you learned Greek. You spent years of your life in this arena.
I do not believe in a Santa Claus God. I don't believe in that big old man in the sky, which completely eliminates accountability for all the bad stuff, but definitely the good stuff. That's all God. I can't get there. I have shifted my spirituality to where I now believe, and I think Jesus believed this too, that divinity isn't out there. Divinity is in here. And I think that Jesus was much more in tune with his own divinity than the rest of us, which is how we could maybe claim that, that Jesus was God. Well, we all are divine within ourselves. Some of us are more in touch with the divinity within ourselves than others. And this is not a super far-fetched idea. So when people come to you in the yoga tradition and they say namaste, what namaste literally translated means, I bow to the divine within you. So what I think is God is not a sentient Santa Claus God, like dude up there. I think God is what happens when my divinity and your divinity intersect. And when you get an entire community of people whose divinity intersects, that's where you have what I would consider a religious experience, because all of our divinity has intersected in the same time, in the same place.
What is divinity?
It's the part we can't explain yet with science. It's soul. It's our desires for wanting to be better. It's the part of us that wants to be more than what we currently are. It's the part that helps us to put pieces in place. So religion, I think, seeks to satisfy humanity's desire for meaning and belonging. I think humanity has an innate desire to have a purpose and to belong somewhere. And without those two things, we're just lost. Religion has created a safe space for a lot of people to find meaning and belonging. It's not, for me, the only place anymore where you can find meaning and belonging. But to answer your question, meaning and belonging, that would be what I would consider divinity. That search for that is the divine within ourselves. And the more we search for it and the more we start putting puzzle pieces together, that we're like, oh, okay, this is where I belong. And not just where I belong in my community, but where I belong in the entire scheme of creation, worlds, universe. That's what I consider divinity.
So this idea of purpose and belonging, from my perspective, which is obviously from a scientific perspective, the finding purpose and finding belonging and finding your tribe and the people that you need to be with to create that, what you would call a religious experience, that is necessary for survival. We're not individual, our species needs others to survive. So to me, that's survival instinct.
So I think that you and I probably aren't as far off from each other, but we have just very different language around describing what that is. I think you're spot on. I think that science explains how, and the spirituality is the what. What is it, and then how is it come to be? So I think that they actually can go quite hand in hand. I do believe that there are things outside of our physical selves that we maybe can't explain yet, and maybe down the road we can explain it with science. But I have had too many just real life experiences that I can't explain with science. There have been many, many times in my life where I got in my car and I set out to do my errands. And in my head, I was going to do A, B, and C, and then come home. And as I got finished with A, I got this gnawing sense that I had to switch it up. I had to do C and then B. Even though it didn't make any sense, like physically, the car made more sense to go A, B, and C, but there was something that was like, nope, you got to do A, C, and then B. And whenever I did that and I switched it up and I did A, C, and B, I would either hear something on the radio that I really needed to hear that day that I would have missed had I done B and C, or run into somebody at C location that I would have missed had I gone to B first. So, and that has happened so many times in my life where I just got this feeling like the thing I thought I was going to do, that's not the right thing, and I have to change course. And there was always, always a reason why that I often didn't even know until later.
With all the respect for that, I think that's still selective, because what about that mother who turned down the road and got in a car accident? Wouldn't it have been great if someone had, if that force had come to her and say, no, turn left instead of right, and then you won't be in the car accident? I mean, I can know that that's happening probably millions of times every second, where someone is in the wrong place at the wrong time and could have had some sort of signal or feeling or direction that would have saved them from that. Why would it save one person and not save another? To me, that's cruel.
I mean, that puts some sentience to it. What you're
Right.
talking about is a sentience. I'm not talking about a sentience. I'm not talking about a person or a god
Or an
sending me a
angel.
signal. That's not what I'm talking about. Kind of what I'm talking about is, and this is again where I see the divinity within myself. I think that in those moments, I am tapping into something that we all have the capacity to tap into and just don't, for a variety of reasons. Because I'm sure that there is a bazillion times when I missed that innate, that intuition. I am so intuition driven. And when I trust my intuition, it very rarely fails me. So I don't think that it's a sentience that's choosing you get to die and you get to be saved. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is we all have within us this ability to tap into something that maybe we can't explain just now. And it's an intuition. I guess intuition divinity would be real like adjacent, that I think some people can tap into better than others. I think Gandhi could tap into that way better than most people. Jesus tapped into it um, way more often. And it came along with an understanding of like the ability to take the big picture look at humanity and see things and see patterns that other people didn't have the capacity to see. So it's not unscientific if you're stepping back and looking at patterns. But I do think that there is something in an intuition that that for me I have to lean into.
Not dismissing that intuition, but put on your scuba gear, girl. Put on your scuba gear. It feels like you're rubbing up against saying something like, if I had been more in touch with my own divinity, I wouldn't have gotten cancer. Or if I had been in touch with my
Oh,
own divinity, I
mm-mm.
wouldn't have dropped out of college and been kicked out of my house. Or if I
No,
had gotten more in touch with my divinity, then I wouldn't have had that fender bender and hurt the dog. It feels a
that's
little bit
not
like bumping up against that.
okay. I can see where you would say that. I certainly would not say that your intuition could prevent you from getting cancer at all. Like
So how deep
that
does
would
that
be cruel.
intuition go? Yeah, right? How deep does that intuition go, saving you from
It's not about saving. I think that's probably part of what you're sort of hung up on is that my intuition saves me from things. I don't think it's about saving me. I think it's about communicating. My intuition helps me communicate with the world in a way that voice and writing just don't do. It's a way of interacting, not just communicating. It's just a way of experiencing and interacting and communicating
so it's a way
with the world
to
around
grow
us.
and connect with the world.
Yeah, I think so.
Using your intuition to do that because I
Yeah.
use my microscope to do that.
Okay, so tell me about that.
I trust my gut because my gut has been fed by a lot of my own experiences. And I pay attention to things and I remember them and I file them away. And so when something comes up that's familiar or that I can sort of predict the outcome, then I have an idea of how to go forward and I trust my gut to a degree. But I think because we were raised in such an environment in the church of you have to believe, not despite the fact that it's unprovable, you have to believe because it's unprovable. And
Yeah.
that messes up a critically thinking mind. That messes one up. The harder you believe, the less it's possible to prove this fact, the more you have to believe in it. And to me, that's completely flip-flopped from my approach to the world. So I think because we were raised in that environment, I right now don't trust things unless I can go and see them myself. We had a seventh grade teacher, Mr. Roberts.
Mr.
Legend.
Robert.
Amazing. He was iconic. And so many things of what he said, I remember word for word. And he would have this big conversation, almost an entire hour conversation, seventh grade. How do you know the sun sets in the west? How do you know? Like, well, it's in a book. Or we can look at the size of the earth and where the sun is relative to that. All of those answers. We talked almost an hour looking for this answer. How do you know the sun sets in the west? And we finally got to it after the bulk of the hour, that because I saw it, right? And that struck me so hard. Like, yeah, I didn't even read it in a book. I saw it. And to me, that means, okay, now that's something that I can say that I've seen. And that really informed the way that I move forward in the world of being a scientist and looking under the microscope and saying, okay, well, I can see that with my own eyes. I trust books even that are written by other people who are also thinking and wanting to get to that very, very nugget of truth. So I do trust books, but I won't trust someone telling me about a book. I'd rather go look at that book with my own eyes, or look at that sun with my own eyes, or look in the microscope with my own eyes.
Okay. So, yes, I agree that being able to see something with our own eyes is one of the critical or receive it if you can't see you receive it some way. Some way
Right.
of receiving that information is how you make sense of the world. Since you brought him up, Mr. Roberts asked the class to name the continents. This is 7th grade now. And I raised my hand and I said England. When in my head I was thinking Europe, but I got it wrong. I straight up got it wrong. Peter Parpar. I'm naming names. Sis, I'm naming names. He was my childhood bully. The name, just to say it out loud, gives me the heebie jeebies. Sorry, Peter, if you're listening. You earned it. He laughed out loud when I said England in front of the whole entire class. He laughed at me. Mr. Roberts shut him down. Mr. Roberts said, I think you were going for Europe. Looked straight in Peter Parpar's eyes and said, everybody has a right to make mistakes from time to time. And you're not an exception. You are included. Everybody in this class gets to make mistakes from time to time. That is a spiritual moment for me because he saw something that my soul needed and provided it in that moment.
Okay, well, if anyone was supposed to be teaching middle school, it's Mr. Robert. I don't even know his first name. Mr. Roberts.
He didn't have a first name. His first name was Mr.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about the soul. I know we're way over it. Let's talk about the soul for a minute. And I feel like there's a place for it that it might not belong. So in neuroscience, there's something called the binding problem, which is that there's a whole host of neuroscientists who are looking at the molecular and cellular interactions in the brain. So they're looking at neurons and they're looking at axons and they're looking at boutons and they're looking at the neurotransmitters. So these very tiny pieces of the brain and how they work in what they call black boxes. Very, very specific. And then there's a whole other branch of neuroscience that deals with perception and psychology and memory. I mean, all of these big picture things that we know our brain can do. And the binding problem is that there's no connection right now. There's no cogent connection between looking at the molecules and how the brain is organized and how these thoughts and emotions and religion, all of these things connect with one another. And it's called the binding problem. And I think that that area in the middle that neuroscientists cannot connect together yet is a place that we can put the soul. But yes. I don't think that the soul has to be the only answer. Whatever you want to call it, I think that's a convenient place to put soul, but I think it's something else. I think we will figure it out eventually. And even if we want to call it the soul, that's fine. But I think it's something that we can eventually explain.
I agree with you. I think all of these things are things we can eventually explain, because things that people way, way back hundreds and hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago thought was magic or God, we now can explain with science. So I have no doubt that we can explain it with science someday. I don't think that that takes away from the awe that I feel when I think about a person's soul or a person's spirit or a person's being. And where you tend to want to try to figure out the nuts and bolts, how does it work? I rather would try to figure out, how do I nurture it? I don't need to know what it is in order for me to want to nurture mine and to nurture yours as well.
I love this so much, and I think that there's a place for both of us in this world.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I'm just really glad that I don't have to figure it out, because my brain is not work that way.
So I feel the need to go back and apologize for that long story about neurotransmitters, but I got really excited. It's so exciting. Look at all that stuff that people are looking at, and it's so cool and it's so amazing.
Do not apologize for being passionate about a thing, woman.
Amazing. Coming soon on Super Random Things with Those Sisters. When we were young teens, in our small town, there was a scandal of a pastor at one of the churches who was abusing little girls and maybe little boys. But it was found out and they stopped it and they arrested him. And I remember the week that happened, we went to church, and our pastor, who was obviously friends of the other pastors in this small community, was telling us what happened and how he reacted. Our pastor was just pure gold, nice, kind, gentle person. And he was describing from the pulpit that he had to go and sit in prison and forgive this person. And it had been less than a week since we all found out about this. And that was a pivotal moment in my life, because I couldn't wrap my mind around, oh, we just forgave him. That's it. Forgiveness. That's it. Just forgiven. And yeah, he'll go to jail and spend the rest of his life there and never work in the ministry again, obviously. But we've forgiven him. And to this day, I don't have a comfortable feeling in my stomach from that event about forgiveness.
That reminds me of a story of a time when I was also in ministry, and one of my colleagues' daughters got murdered. They gathered everybody in a room, his friends, his colleagues, on the first day of the trial for the person that murdered his daughter. And I was asked to give a few words to the family. I did a scripture reading, and I ended by saying that at some point it would be good for you to work toward forgiveness. That's probably not going to be today. It might not even be this year. And it won't be for the sake of the person who is sitting in that trial right now. It will be because you will not be able to sustain carrying the burden of the anger and the hatred for the rest of your life. And the work of forgiveness is not about absolving the other person of what they did, but it's about letting go of that burden that you carry when you hold on to that resentment.
The modern concept of forgiveness doesn't even really need to involve the person who did the thing. It involves the person who's holding that burden of not forgiving.
I think there's a really big misconception about forgiveness in our culture. On social media, I've heard a ton of conversation around how the people on the left are never going to forgive MAGA for the abuses that they're seeing happening in our country right now. And I think that culturally, the concept of forgiveness includes this element that you are absolving the other person. I think that's the misconception. I think that's part of the reason why everybody is so adamant that they're never going to forgive, because they don't see people doing the work and they don't want to let them off the hook for what they've done. So forgiveness is not the same thing as withholding accountability. My definition of forgiveness is when you know and acknowledge that the scales of justice are imbalanced and that they will never be in balance, but that at the same time you are willing to let go of the burden of carrying that. Our puppies would really love if you would like and subscribe to the content. If you like it, look at those
Look at the
faces.
faces. Thank you.